Dear crystal lovers, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, my name is AM and I'm the founder of AVIUVI. Today I'm doing another vlogcast. We've really had some full circle moments recently in our family. First getting, you know what, on pretty much the 2-year anniversary, and then afterwards a lot of people from the past re-emerging into our lives. Of course, work-related things are opening up and returning, but it definitely feels different than it did before. Peculiar things manifesting out of the blue, and we all feel way more energized than we have for a long time. However, these days, one global collective challenge takes over the next, and then the next, and the next. So I wanted to give you some spiritual perspective today. I'm gonna take you back to about 4 years ago, around the time when I became a QHHT practitioner. It all started one night. I had my first sleep paralysis experience. And when I say first, I mean the first sleep paralysis experience that I was aware of and that I was able to remember. My husband Andreas has had many of these instances. So while I was in the sleep paralysis, I definitely knew what was going on and I was not afraid. Sleep paralysis is when the body is sleeping and unable to move. Meanwhile, you're consciously aware and hallucinating. In my sleep paralysis, what I experienced was that I was laying in a large bed in a dark room. Suddenly, a levitating large brown cloak, the size of the bed, laid on top of me and proceeded to smother and choke me. Again, I was not scared, I knew what was happening. But some moments later I woke up fully and told Andreas about it. I was actually quite excited because I definitely felt like I had had this experience many times before and it felt really familiar to me. Andreas was excited too, and he encouraged me to research if there was any metaphysical explanation for this phenomenon. I was pretty reluctant because it didn't feel metaphysical to me, but more like a glitch in my brain. Sleep paralysis is common, and I'm sure that there's a good scientific explanation to it. Mind you, at this time we also had a 1-year-old child, so our sleep was constantly disrupted. But I did what you do and I checked the internet for any spiritual and metaphysical explanation for sleep paralysis. Spoiler alert, there is a lot of scary stories out there. So I didn't find what I was looking for, but one name kept coming up, Dolores Cannon. And it continued for weeks. This little lady was popping up everywhere every time I opened my computer. At first I assumed it was some kind of algorithm, but honestly after a while it just became too weird. Finally I caved. Dolores Cannon herself was still freaking me out, but I started watching a few videos that QHHT practitioners had posted on YouTube. If you don't know what QHHT is, it's a hypnosis therapy that Dolores Cannon developed, and it deals with past, future, and parallel lives. But QHHT goes way beyond that. Me being curious about everything psychological and spiritual, I had stumbled upon Brian Weiss's work a few years earlier, so I was already a little bit familiar with this type of hypnosis. The aim with QHHT is to establish clear contact with the client's higher self, the part of the client that is beyond the physical body and the identity that the client has taken in his current life. It's the part of the individual that is spiritually connected with everything, and it's the part that is completely unconditional. It is the real you, it is the big you. Clients mainly come to have sessions to receive clarity and guidance about love, health, wealth, career, and purpose. And through different hypnosis techniques, they are put in a very comfortable and elevated state of awareness where they are able to answer questions. As a practitioner, your job is primarily to ask the questions that the client has prepared prior to the session. But what many of these practitioners had found was that when they spoke to the client's higher selves, a picture of the current time and near future for the collective started forming. In other words, various clients of various practitioners from all over the world started telling similar stories. And these stories really hit home for me. So that's what I'm going to tell you a little bit about today. Some of the practitioners that I immediately felt connected with were Ron and Michael, who are the founders of New Earth Ascending. And I definitely recommend that you check them out if any of what I'm talking about today resonates with you. Short time after my sleep paralysis experience, they came all the way to Copenhagen to have QHHT sessions with Andreas and I, and that's when I decided to become a practitioner too. I'll do a vlogcast about my session if you're interested, but today I just want to talk about the quite interesting themes that came up in other people's sessions about 3 or 4 years back. The first theme was what was called the event. What you need to know about these sessions is that for clients there will always be different ways of interpreting information, the information that they receive from the higher selves during this hypnosis. Because the client is in a very comfortable state, most often the stories are presented not good nor bad, but always quite beautifully and almost poetic. Also, the event was visually described in many ways back then and with varying timelines. What the event is to me is a time in history, a period with a chain of several events, with what happened in the previous couple of years just being one of those. So for me, it's like a term more like the Renaissance or the Enlightenment, but much more significant. And what's being brought forward into the light during the event are not new things. Though it might be presented as if it is, it's just an old myth. It's harmful unconscious patterns that have been weaved into our everyday life here for centuries. And these are all being purged. But what all of these sessions 3-4 years back had in common was that a global series of events that involved every single human being on Earth would occur. The purpose of the event was to elevate the collective consciousness of humanity. And this was something that both I and many others had felt the buildup of for a long time. I can't really describe why or how, but it was just like an inner knowing, a feeling of something globally and individually accelerating and reaching the tipping point. I also know that a lot felt that they had to mentally prepare for something without really knowing what it was. It wasn't for me a doomsday scenario or anything like that, but definitely a shift or, an event. In these sessions 3-4 years ago, what it would look like and how it would occur was described in various ways, but one very interesting factor that they all had in common was that it would start out airborne. It was sometimes described as a cloud, and sometimes as iridescent smoke, or as one or several waves in the air that would impact all of humanity, both individually and collectively. And see if any of this rings a bell for you. The event would leave everybody dazed and confused, in a state where they would physically have to lay down. People would experience a change of senses, dizziness, headaches, body aches, fever, and fatigue. So basically what we would call Ascension symptoms. However, it would only mildly or not at all affect children. People would be separated and unable to move around. And some would try to exploit the immediate chaos and turmoil and hijack the global conversation to their own advantage. They would attempt to divide by any means, but eventually they would fail. Self-serving systems would be rejected, and from these extreme contrasts, a new world was born. This was called the New Earth. Now we're definitely not there yet, and there was always a transitional phase, but we have seen so much of this in the last 2 years. This is what was said in sessions 3-4 years ago, and see if any of this applies to you about this current time that we're in now. The event would be a catalyst for individuals to focus on their health and taking an active part in boosting the immune system, eating clean and plant-based. The principle of eating clean was to create a clear vessel, your body, for your higher self to work through, and for building a strong natural immune system to withstand whatever physical challenges there might be in this highly saturated transitional phase. Another important theme, again this was 3-4 years back, was learning how to work the land and be self-sufficient. The concept of living symbiotically with nature came up many times. First of all, as recognizing nature and the earth as a living being, and also learning how to let it provide for you. Generally, the message was everyone will be more outside. Also learning how to build things and create what you want in your life with your own 2 hands. Learning artistic skills such as music, sculpture and painting. Anything really, but just for the pleasure of creating. Learning healing modality, like having a metaphysical first aid kit at hand. That was definitely my motivation for learning QHHT. I didn't intend it to be my main career path, but more like a personal offering to friends and family and whomever was interested. Since then, the way it has expanded my mind is present in every aspect of my life today, including how I work with crystals. Another thing was homeschooling, and this came up a lot. Homeschooling is an interesting one because I kept hearing it over and over again from many sources, and it was one that I didn't quite know how to feel about. So if you think about it, if you had heard a statement 4 years ago that practically every parent on the planet would be homeschooling their kids, would you believe it honestly? The way in which it was presented back then, however, was more that it would be the parents' choice to homeschool rather than the outside circumstances making the decision. And another global theme was the majority of people spending less time at work and more time on figuring out what they really want to do. Again, like homeschooling, this wasn't presented to be because of external pressure, but more like a conscious decision. These are just a few examples of what came up about the new earth in QHHT sessions back then. When you're speaking with the higher self, time always becomes very abstract. So what might be perceived by the human mind as a linear timeline may not be that at all. So my approach is that all of this is happening simultaneously. The various catalysts in the form of events, the new earth taking form, and the ascension where we individually and collectively level up. On an individual level, ascension is when we raise in frequency and start engaging in spiritual evolution. We recognize ourselves as spirit and transcend the service to self world order that has dominated for so long. But there is a lot to transcend. Centuries of service to self dogma weaved into the fabric of everyday life, both individually and collectively, and this is what is being brought up to the surface and into the light now. Right now we are in this catalyst stage. So I encourage you to hold your ground and to stay in love and peace and joy and kindness, no matter what the circumstances might appear to be. Insist on living a good life every day and every moment. We all want that. A life where what you project out into the world is an authentic reflection of who you truly are, which is of course spirit. My initiation into this started with something that I found quite banal, and that was the sleep paralysis. Mine was a lot more gentle than a world crisis, for example, which is the catalyst for many right now. But since then, I became a QHHT practitioner myself, and shortly after that, I founded AVIUVI. At the moment, I'm not doing sessions, and if you want a QHHT session or what they call IQH sessions, I'll definitely recommend that you contact Ron and Michael at New Earth Ascending. And if you want to know what's coming up next for all of us, go check out their YouTube channel. So QHHT is only one of a handful of resources that I personally rely on for support. However, with these final words, I want you to remember that you are all you need. You don't have to listen to me or anyone else. You don't have to have sessions or buy crystals for spirit to thrive in your current incarnation. All of these external things are only tools along the way. But if you enjoyed this vlogcast, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It helps me to know what you want me to talk about, and it helps others to find this content if that is what they're looking for. I wish you all the most wonderful day with so much love to you and yours.